What's up? What's up?
I didn't start it weird this time.
And we did our monthly catch up.
Yeah. So your episodes, the next ones will be shorter. Maybe. I don't know about
the last
one. Because when I tell you I have notes, I have notes. So
but this one we're gonna do.
Yeah. This one was originally supposed to be for April, right after the Massachusetts episode, because there were so many places in Salem that I wanted to like dedicate an episode to Salem. And then it just didn't happen. So it's happening now.
So Haunted Salem.
Yes. We've done our catch up, so we're just going to get right on into it.
I just want to note that Brittany wrote this whole episode.
I want you to know it took me a week.
It was not planned that way.
No.
I just looked down and I got an email.
Like, there were a lot of things happening. And I was like, I have the time. I'm already working on it. I'll just go ahead and crank it out.
I was like,
I have enough of a list that I could do a part 2.
Nice.
So
I just looked down and there's an email on my phone on the podcast email. And I'm like, oh, this says whole episode. Does that mean that she did my part also? So I haven't read through it. I meant to, didn't. So I'm going to be just as surprised of all of you.
So just know if anything out of pocket is said, it was me. Tell Cersei it was me.
Okay, so the first one, Gallows Hill. Oh, and 2, if we've done a Salem episode before, and if we retouch on something that we've already done, kiss our ass.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah. So nearly 200 years ago, author Nathaniel Hawthorne would spend his afternoons wandering around every corner of Salem, Massachusetts' famous execution place. Every afternoon, he would take his children to Gallows Hill, where 19 victims were put to death for quote-unquote witchcraft. Legend says that the descendants of the accused would pass the secret location of Gallows Hill through the generations. Nathaniel Hawthorne was the direct great-grandson of Judge John Haythorne, who was the man responsible for standing trial for the accused and sentencing innocent people for allegedly practicing witchcraft. Since those days of his leisurely strolls, the specific location of Gallows Hill became lost to time, and historians argue over its location. For the larger part of a century, the true location of Gallows Hill has been believed to be the intersection of Hanson and South Streets. The process for witchcraft executions in 1692 was predictable. In the early morning hours, when the fog was still nestled amongst the tree trunks and flirting with the flowers, the victims were, I like how you worded that, the victims were removed from the old witch jail, I have to remind myself, and forced into 2-wheel ox carts. Christ, this is going to be a long night. These carts would then rumble down modern-day Essex Street in front of the people of Salem Village before coming to a stop somewhere down the hill. According to local folklore, the condemned were then hanged from the locust trees before they were tossed into a ditch, which was their burial place. During that time, it was illegal to give Christian burials to non-Christians, for example, witches. Historians have discovered that the claims about the locust trees were just a myth and that the victims were actually hung from ladders or traditional gallows. It is unlikely that the locust trees would have been strong enough to uphold bodies. Legend also says that after the hangings of those convicted of witchcraft during the witch trials, the sheriff, George Corwin, would have his men throw the bodies into a ditch or a crevice. The hangings would have occurred outside of city limits, and there is no appropriate ditch where the bodies would have been put. It is said that in the dead of the night, the families of the victims would climb into their boats and sail to the Gallows Hill and would gather their loved one and place them in the boat and go down the river back to their homestead and gave them a proper burial. Rebecca Nurse is a great example of this happening, where her family did collect her remains to bury them on their homestead. Today, the location that most people are aware is Gallows Hill is nothing but a baseball diamond, which is located in a children's park. That's crazy. Allegedly, bone fragments have been found there, but there is debate as to whether or not these remains belong to any of the 1692 witch trial victims. According to the Peabody Essex Museum, who reported their findings to author of Ghosts of Salem, Sam Baltrusis, saying bone fragments have been found, but we'll never really know what they are from. The discovery of a record from the late 18th century indicated that there was a mass execution held in the general area of Gallows Hill, and immediately it was assumed that these must be the remains of witch trial victims. However, it was noted in the record that a piece of coffin was found, and as many historians indicate, the 19 witch trial victims were buried without a coffin. They really weren't even buried, if they were, in fact, just thrown in a ditch. There have also been claims made that Philip English, the husband of Mary, who was one of the accused, ended up moving all of the remaining victims after their hangings, but no one knows where he may have moved them to. Another widely believed theory is that the bodies were placed in a church cellar in Marblehead. In January 2016, the Salem News reported, nearly 325 years after the 19 people accused of witchcraft were hanged in the city, a group of scholars has finally confirmed the place where they met their fate, Proctor's Ledge. These 7 scholars formed the Gallows Hill Project and determined that Proctor's Ledge, which was first discovered by historian Sidney Purley in 1921, comprised the perfect placement for Gallows Hill. History professor Emerson Tad Baker at Salem State University reported to the newspaper, there was never really a eureka moment. I think most of us were talking about a number of scholars who were working on this. We knew Purley's research was really good. The project group worked for 5 years and used court records, maps, aerial photos, and ground-penetrating radar to find the answers that so many have sought. Approximately 1,000 records exist from the time period, but there were very few, almost none really, of witness accounts as to the actual hangings. Historian Marilyn Roach made an interesting discovery while digging through the centuries-old records. Apparently, in 1692, Rebecca Eames was accused of practicing evil witchcraft and was removed from her home nearby Boxford. As her cart turned down Boston Street, she could see the gallows where they stood as she headed for Salem Village. Later that day, she was in a preliminary trial, and according to the report, the magistrate asked if she had witnessed the execution that morning. Her response was that she had been at the house below the hill and that yes, she'd witnessed the folks at their hangings. This house below the hill was the John McCarter house and is the same house that Sidney Purley found in 1921. The house stood there until 1890 at 19 Boston Street. The site is now 59 Boston Street, which sits right behind the Walgreens.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
Right. But the ghosts. For decades now, talk of spirits roaming around the Gallows Hill has made for quite the spooky story. Now that we know that Gallows Hill is not the true site of the hangings, that hasn't stopped the tales of ghosts and hauntings from pervading Salem's paranormal culture. Owner of the Salem Night Tour, Tim McGraw, I almost said McGraw, told author Sam Baltrusis that Gallows Hill has a dark history that is completely outside of the witchcraft hysteria, and relayed that Gallows Hill has been the site of multiple suicides and other unexplainable phenomena. There have been reports of full-bodied apparitions spotted within the woods, as well as disembodied voices shrieking in the dead of night. People still worry about the demonic happenings on Gallows Hill, and in 1992, about 200 people from various churches in the area gathered because they were desperately worried about the dark energy that was thick in the area. The Salem Evening News reported before the formal program of singing and prayer began, a group of close to 100 gathered into a small, tight circle on top of Gallows Hill, raised their arms skyward, and chanted, "The curse over Salem with witchcraft is broken." And then they circled the town water tower at the top of the hill, which is decorated with the drawing of a witch, and performed a laying on of hands on the tower as a sign of spiritual healing. Can we talk about how ritualistic that sounds?
Read my next sentence.
I don't know. Oh, I don't know that, but that sounds like witchcraft to me, but I digress.
I was like, that literally sounds like witchcraft.
Yeah. Many who visit report immediately being overcome with a sense of foreboding dread. Ghost tour guides no longer make the arduous trek up the hill and are convinced that evil lurks in the depths of Gallows Hill. One company said, "Something occurs at the eerie spot, and it's not uncommon to see guests burst into tears upon entering the area." Whether or not the area is haunted by any of the 19 victims of the Salem witch trials, which it's likely that it's not one of them, there is seemingly something that is causing some serious paranormal activity at Old Gallows Hill.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard for me to read anything? I don't understand why. I feel like I should do like vocal warm-ups before we do this. Some red leather, yellow leather, leather, yellow. See, I can't even.
So on the subject, since we hit the high points of this location in the discussion on Gallows Hill, I'll keep the discussion of Proctor's Ledge a little bit more brief. As we know, Sidney Purley was the first to suggest that Proctor's Ledge was the place where all of the hangings occurred and in 1936, Salem purchased that property, the city of Salem. Originally, the city named it Witch Memorial Land, since Gallows Hill was still considered to be the execution site at the time. The area was transformed into a public park and went pretty much overlooked for many years. It was renamed Proctor's Ledge, possibly after John Proctor, one of the accused, or his grandson who later purchased the property. John Proctor was executed in August of 1692 after a highly publicized prosecution. He had doubted the validity of witchcraft throughout the trials and accused the afflicted girls of faking their fits. He even went so far as to say that any devil in Salem was within their accusers, not the accused. He wasn't convicted of witchcraft until the execution of his sister-in-law, Rebecca Nurse, and the trial of his third wife, Elizabeth. His former servant, Mary Warren, testified that Proctor had attempted to assault her for putting up a prayer bill and added that he had forced her to touch the devil's book. 32 neighbors attested to Proctor's Christian character, but nonetheless, the court of Oyer and Terminer found the Proctors guilty of witchcraft, and they were sentenced to die by hanging on August 5th, 1692. John was executed at Proctor's Ledge on August 19th. Purley's theory was discounted until the Gallows Hill project team reconsidered his theory and determined that he was actually right this whole time. It is thought that it was too hot for the typical mourning period prior to burial, and in order to get the bodies in the ground before they could begin to rapidly decay, that they were just kind of buried in either a shallow grave or some sort of crevice when they were executed on August 19th. There is no evidence to support this as a long-lasting solution, with the intention being that loved ones would come collect their deceased family members. These retrievals, though, would have had to have been done covertly and most likely in the dead of night due to it being illegal to touch or transport the dead. There aren't a lot of ghost stories or claims at Proctor's Ledge, but a local legend says that a lady in white frequents this area. Some visitors have claimed to catch sight of her, but some say they only catch her disembodied voice. Other visitors have encountered cold spots and reported incandescent orbs. Mayor Driscoll honored the history of Proctor's Ledge in a press release for the memorial, stating that it presents an opportunity for us to come together as a community, recognize the injustice and tragedy perpetrated against those innocent in 1692, and recommit ourselves to the values of inclusivity and justice. The landscape for the memorial was designed by landscape architect Martha Lyon and consists of a semicircular scene surrounded by stone. And it was dedicated on July 19th, 2017, the 325th anniversary of the first execution. No artifacts have ever been found at Proctor's Ledge, but the legacy it has built is more spiritual rather than material. Proctor's Ledge stands as a reminder to ward off intolerance and superstition, or even as a reminder of how much or how little we have overcome the witch hysteria of 1692. But should you plan to visit, it is located at 7 Pope Street, but be mindful that it is located in a residential neighborhood. I think this story might bear a trigger warning.
Trigger warning
for descriptions of torture.
Okay. Yay. So this is the Joshua Ward House. One of the first brick homes built in Salem in 1784, the Joshua Ward House was built by, at the time, renowned bricklayer and woodworker Samuel McIntyre. He did much of the woodwork on the interior of the home, including an original staircase that is one of the oldest surviving pieces of his craft. The home gets its name from its owner, Joshua Ward, who was a successful merchant during this time. This wasn't the first building on this site, though. Excuse me. The Joshua Ward House was built on the site where Sheriff George Corwin's home once stood in the 1680s. Sheriff Corwin is infamous for his involvement in the Salem witch trials, if you remember from our previous episode on the trials. Sheriff Corwin earned his position because of his uncle, Jonathan Corwin, who was the previous owner of the witch house at Salem. He would interrogate the accused at this home. His interviewing techniques were so heinous that he earned the nickname of the Strangler. One of the worst methods of interrogation involved the sheriff tying the neck of his victim to their ankles as tightly as possible until blood began to gush from their noses. It is rumored that he used his own basement in order to torture his victims, whether they were witches or not. The methods were so severe that they would often pledge their allegiance to Satan just to end the horrific forms of punishment. They were subsequently executed for their admissions of guilt. Our history in America is brief and embarrassing at many times, and this shows how far we had come from this type of circumstance. At the time, these practices were perfectly legal and legitimate, which is honestly horrible to think about. In terms of haunted places in Salem, the Joshua Ward House is considered to be one of the most haunted spots, ranking amongst places like the Salem Witch House. Now known as the Merchant Hotel, there have been a wide variety of reports of the paranormal, including multiple people claiming to have been strangled by an unseen pair of hands while visiting this location. Giles Corey, one of the 19 accused and executed, has been known to regularly haunt the Ward House. Some folks have reported finding warm, half-melted candle wax in their rooms, but there are no candles allowed in the rooms. Some of the more frightening encounters include unexplained scratches and burns appearing on guests' arms. There is a photo that exists that is said to be one of Corwin's victims. It's a woman wearing all black with wild-looking hair. She is thought to be the one responsible for the sounds of crying and wailing that have been known to occur. No, my blanket fell.
318 Essex Street in Salem sits a stark white mansion that you may recognize from the film Hocus Pocus. It was the home of Allison, the love interest of our male main character, Max Dennison.
I really didn't know what that said. I'm like, what is that?
It's just
she abbreviated.
A book abbreviation, like a book talk abbreviation. The Ropes mansion has had a long life filled with turmoil. It has been mobbed, modernized, and reutilized, and one inhabitant succumbed to smallpox and another caught on fire. Ropes Mansion was built by Samuel Bernard sometime in the late 1720s. There is very little information known about Samuel, but we know that he was a merchant who moved to Salem from Deerfield, Massachusetts. He led a prosperous life in Salem Village, and he married and remarried on 4 occasions.
That is so wild to me.
His first wife, Mary, died while the couple still resided in Deerfield. Second wife, Rachel, died in 1743. Then he remarried Elizabeth Williams, who then died in 1753. And his fourth wife, Catherine, lived with him in Ropes Mansion until he died in 1762. She was the sole survivor of all of his wives.
Good Lord.
I did say perhaps she got to him before he could get to her. It is assumed that both Rachel and Elizabeth died on the property. However, they are not suspected to still be in residence. In 1768, the mansion's namesake, Judge Nathaniel Ropes, purchased the home from the nephew of Samuel Bernard. Ropes was an unpopular but wealthy attorney and Harvard graduate who, despite people not really even liking him at all, had an impressive career. He represented Salem in the colonial legislature, and he later served on the governor's council. He was a judge for the inferior court of common pleas, and by 1772 he was appointed to the superior court of judicature, which was an impressive appointment as that was the highest court in the colony. Ropes was a loyalist, which had increasingly become unfavorable due to some tax controversies within Salem Village. Judges had been paid off by elected representatives of the general court, which made them partial to colonial interests. Therefore, the British proposed that the Crown provide their salaries, and colonists were infuriated by this bold imposition of the Crown on colonial life and demanded that these judges reject the royal salaries. The colonists declared that any of them who shall accept of and depend upon the pleasure of the Crown for his support, independent of grants and acts of the General Assembly, will discover to the world that he has not a due sense of importance of an impartial administration of justice, that he is an enemy to the Constitution, and he has it in his heart to promote the establishment of an arbitrary government in the province. Ropes still had loyalist views, however, he did agree to deny the salary. But the colonists were still pissed off at him, and they attacked Ropes Mansion in March of 1774. The mob of colonists threw mud, stones, and sticks at the windows and demanded that Ropes renounce all allegiance to the British Crown. Ropes never did get the chance to do that, though, because he up and died the next day at 47 years old. It seems he had contracted smallpox, and he succumbed to the illness. It is not known if the attack caused the death, but the Ropes family did feel as though the disturbance of the mob progressed his illness. Another cause for the mob attack of Ropes Mansion could have been the idea that though Nathaniel Ropes could afford the inoculation for smallpox, that he chose not to receive it and therefore infected others in the community who could not afford it. Add in the fact that tensions were already high due to public resources becoming increasingly scarce and overpriced, which ultimately led to a crowd in Marblehead setting fire to a smallpox hospital. Some things never change.
I was literally sitting here.
It felt like I was,
thing.
yeah. When I was writing it, I was like,
storm the Capitol.
It was very much giving COVID times.
Yeah.
Over 60 years later, more tragedy arrived at Ropes Mansion in 1839 when Abigail Nabby Ropes met a tragic end. For many years, it was thought that Abigail was Nathaniel's wife, and she burnt to death in the Ropes mansion, but Abigail was his daughter, not his wife. Her dress was ignited by the mansion's fireplace when her petticoats went up in flames. Portraits found in public buildings in Salem memorialized her death. They established that she died unmarried from burns received when carrying coals from one room to another. Her official obituary, reported in the Salem Gazette, said that she had succumbed to a distressing illness of 3 weeks caused by her clothes accidentally taking fire. The Ropes mansion once again faced a fire in August of 2009, and this fire destroyed the plaster ceilings as well as carpets and wallpaper. Employees swiftly responded and saved many of the home's artifacts. The cause of the fire was suspected to be a heat gun that had been used on the exterior of the home, but others suspect it was Nabby herself. Another fire in the mansion's history was in 1891 when the Putnam family in England and America recounted how the home set on fire. Recently, it has been moved back, and now the residents of Mrs. Ropes, who have kept the old house externally nearly as it was, but the interior, unfortunately, was recently damaged by fire. According to the visitors of Ropes Mansion, they say it is unquestionably haunted. Visitors have reported hearing the sounds of Abigail's agonized screams, and some have reported seeing her full-bodied apparition throughout the house. It has also been thought that she was the cause of the 2009 fire because she disagreed with some of the renovations that were occurring at the time. Some say that they believe that Nathaniel is also haunting the place right along with her. Former caretakers Rick and Georgette Stafford claimed that they captured Nathaniel on film. The image was captured during an insurance appraisal, and it revealed 2 hands of a man seated on a couch. Otherwise, the specter is unseen, which I saw this photo. I saw nothing. But a photo was published by Robert Cahill in Ghostly Haunts and wrote that here the judge sits for a spell on the front hall couch. After all, if you were wandering around this mansion for over 200 years, you'd want to sit for a while, wouldn't you? There are also accounts of the mansion's garden being haunted. Visitors have claimed to feel an icy touch of an unseen spirit, and others have reported hearing the whispers of a disembodied voice. It is thought that this could be the spirit of Abigail, but also that of longtime gardener Andy Bye. He was employed at the mansion in 1931, and he oversaw the garden until 1994, when his employment ended upon his death. Is it possible that Bye is responsible for mysterious tapping that is felt by garden goers? Overall, this opulent 18th century home made for an impressive backdrop for the Halloween party in Hocus Pocus and continues to draw in guests from all around the world despite renovations and the entire mansion being relocated.
Is it this picture?
Yeah, I don't see shit. Don't you know I filled up my water and I didn't even bring it in here?
Okay. In 1668, Salem sea captain and merchant John Turner and his wife Elizabeth built the House of the Seven Gables. 3 generations of the Turner family lived in this seaside mansion before it was sold to Captain Samuel Ingersoll in 1782. He was an active captain during the Great Age of Sail, and he died at sea. The property was eventually left to his daughter, Susanna. Susanna was a cousin of author Nathaniel Hawthorne, and his visits to his cousin's home are credited with inspiring the setting and title of his 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Caroline Emerton, a philanthropist and preservationist, purchased the mansion in 1908 and worked with architect Joseph Everett Chandler to restore it to its original appearance from the 1600s. Her goal was to preserve the house for future generations, provide educational opportunities for visitors, and to use the proceeds from the tours to fund her settlement programs. Thanks to Emerton and Chandler's efforts, the Turner Ingersoll Mansion has survived with many original features spanning over 4 centuries of American architectural history. During that time, Emerton and the organization's trustees acquired and moved 5 additional history structures to the site. The retired Beckett House, circa 1687, the Hooper Hathaway House, circa 1682, Nathaniel Hawthorne's birthplace, circa 1750, the Phippen House, circa 1782, and the Counting House, circa 1830. Today, the campus that includes the House of the Seven Gables is its own historic district and is on the National Register of Historic Places. It is said that the mansion is one of the more haunted locations in Salem. Author Rosemary Ellen Guiley of Haunted Salem wrote that the Turner Ingersoll's House of the Seven Gables is a ghostly reminder of shipping fortunes made and then lost. A bust blame on the curse of the witch trials of 1692. Nathaniel Hawthorne harbored guilt for his family's role in the Salem witch trials. His great-grandfather, John Haythorne, was a judge during the trials, and as record shows, he may have feigned sympathy for the accused witches, but never regretted his direct involvement in their trials and subsequent executions. It is said that Judge Haythorne truly believed that witchcraft was rampant and evil and a true threat to Salem Village. He is the person responsible for sending Sarah Good to jail based on accusations of witchcraft when she was 7 months pregnant. She languished under horrible conditions during the final months of her pregnancy with little to no food or bedding. This resulted in her child dying just days after it being born in jail. Following this hysteria of the 1600s, the Haythorne family lost much of their wealth and their high social status plummeted, which was no doubt influenced by the families of the accused who sought justice for their loved ones. By the time that Nathaniel was born in 1804, the curse of the Haythorne family had not yet been lifted. He spent his days with his cousin Susanna in the 1840s. She revealed to him more stories of their family's turbulent past. She told him of stories of the family involvement in slavery and other evil doings. Initially, Nathaniel expressed interest in the Salem witch trials, but as he aged and matured, he grew to be repulsed by his ancestor, Judge John Haythorne, to the point that he allowed Susanna to convince him to change the spelling of his last name. Up until a few generations before Judge Haythorne, the name had actually been spelled with a W as Hawthorne. Susanna expressed concern over this budding career as a writer and persuaded him to add the W back in so that no one would ever know of his shameful heritage. Despite this change, though, his writings demonstrated his total disgust with the sins of his great-grandfather. In the opening pages of Hawthorne's debut novel, The Scarlet Letter, he took the time to apologize for his family involvement in the trials. He wrote, "He, Judge Haythorne, made himself so conspicuous in the martyrdom of the witches that their blood may fairly be said to have left a stain upon him. I know not whether these ancestors of mine bethought themselves to repent and ask pardon of the heavens for their cruelties. At all events, I, the present writer, as their representative, hereby take shame upon myself for their sakes, and pray that any curse incurred by them may now and henceforth be removed." His book, The House of the Seven Gables, released the following year in 1851, did nothing to further separate himself from his ancestry. The book's entire plot is based around Judge John Haythorne's fight with Philip English, whose wife Haythorne condemned to death for witchcraft. Spoiler alert if you intend to read it, but in the end, Judge, is it Pyncheon?
Yeah, I was going to say pensions.
Okay, pensions, good fortune, slowly seeps away from him, and at the first dinner he has in the house, he dies by choking on his own blood, a la Game of Thrones red wedding style. But anyways, I guess we are here to talk about the ghosts and stuff. Depending on who you ask, the mansion is haunted. Tour guides and employees tend to argue that the mansion isn't haunted at all, and when asked if there may be any spirits lurking around, they are very quick to reply, nope, no ghosts here. Local lore is very different, though. There is a famous that was her. She twitched, and it was like there was a light flashing. There's a famous, not so secret anymore staircase where visitors have witnessed the spirit of a man clambering up and down the stairs. Some have thought he may be linked to the Underground Railroad, but there's no evidence to support that it was ever a stop on the railroad, and those stairs weren't even built until 50 years later, or 50 years after the end of the Civil War. Some have reported seeing a boy who enjoys playing in the attic. Throughout the day, his footsteps have been heard jumping around upstairs as he giggles. One historian said that the attic once functioned as a servant's quarters, and that it's possible that he may have been the child of a former servant. Many believe that the boy is instead Julian, the son of Nathaniel Hawthorne. The author of my source notes that this is an unlikely story because by the time Hawthorne did have children, he was no longer a young man and wouldn't have been visiting the mansion as frequently as he had once done. The last specter that is frequently reported is Susanna Ingersoll herself, the cousin of Nathaniel, who told him all the tales of the Salem witch hysteria. She has been spotted walking along the halls and even peeking out of windows to see who is entering the estate through the garden. From reports, it seems as though she is perfectly content to remain in her home. One witness also claimed to have been choked by invisible hands in the attic as well. So if you plan to visit, I suggest starting there if you want the chance to participate in Ghostly Fight Club.
Yeah. And I guess my list at the top
was not out of correct order.
It was out of order. I don't know how we're going to get through this one without laughing like two little kids, but we're going to try.
We're not.
With the slogan, we're not number one, but with two T's, we're right up there. Bunghole Liquors housed more than just liquid spirits, but also the ghostly form as well. While many of the hauntings in Salem originate from the period of the witch trials, the spirits here seem to be more recent. Originally, the building housing Bunghole Liquors was a funeral home during the Prohibition era. In the bowels of the building...
I can't stand you.
In the basement is where the bodies were embalmed. This is not out of the ordinary since it was a funeral home, but along with that, there was a speakeasy for secret drinking. Dead bodies will never cramp the style of those who are just looking to have a good time. The name Bunghole Liquors comes from this time period. And since drinking was against the law, those looking for a drink at the speakeasy space would refer to it as the bunghole. By definition, a bunghole is a hole that is made in a barrel to release its contents. And in this context, the name alluded to a leak or a hole that allowed for liquor to flow. Ghost City Tours said that this location was perfect for transporting illegal liquids from the ships docked at Derby Wharf. Apparently, there was a system of tunnels under Salem that made for the perfect opportunity for a boozy-filled bunghole. Rumor has it that one of the regulars to the bunghole once told the owner that if the prohibition was ever lifted, that he should transform it into a liquor store, and it is exactly what he did in 1933, and it officially became the bunghole.
I'm so glad I really didn't have to read this because I wouldn't have been able to.
Employees have long reported paranormal experiences, particularly when working alone after dark. Unsurprisingly, the bunghole's basement is believed to house the most paranormal activity, and there have been many mysterious incidents reported by staff. In Suzanne Saville's book, Hidden History of Salem, she claims that the majority of the spirits in Salem are cats. She mentions that a group of cats wanders the streets of Salem, entering open doors and windows of different properties.
I'm here for that, actually.
Many reports have been made of ghostly cats all over Salem, and one employee of the bunghole confessed that he felt a cat rub against his legs while he was in the bathroom. He said the lights were off and he felt a furry animal moving the way a cat does against his leg.
Why are you using the bathroom in the dark?
I didn't ask. He asked a coworker to check out the area and they found no animals inside. Traditional folklore says that witches are known to have cats around, particularly black ones, and these are often known as a witch's familiar. These are believed to be low-ranking demons that are gifted to the witch by the devil.
She side-eyed Amara sitting over here with her.
Sometimes the witch would inherit a familiar from an ancestor, and these would range from a wide variety of species, from frogs and insects to the most common companion of cats. Apparently, familiars feed on witches' blood by sucking from their fingers or suckling on their warts. What do you think about that, Amara? She's like, In addition to these feline visitors, employees have mentioned seeing strange women going into the bar and then disappearing. And one employee accidentally bumped into a woman and at the second glance, when he turned to apologize, the woman had simply vanished. A skeptical manager added that the basement security cameras have captured glowing orbs floating around the dark space. It is also believed that the ghosts of the men that used to attend parties there are just stopping by for a little nightcap.
See, I'm here for a random group of ghost cats.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be like, pss, 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 trying to get them to come to me. Okay. Former home of Jonathan Corwin, heir to one of the largest fortunes of the Puritan New England era, and would go on to have a well-documented and highly publicized role in the Salem witch trials. Jonathan Corwin was one of the judges during the trials and investigated many of the claims of the alleged witchcraft activities and signed several arrest warrants at the time. Even though this period was well documented, it is difficult to surmise his total role in the trials. The witch house is the only structure in Salem that still stands with direct ties to the trials. With it being the home of one of the judges who took part in the arrests, it is said to be haunted by the spirits of the innocent. We mentioned Judge John Haythorne previously, and he was a good friend of Jonathan Corwin. Haythorne built an empire through mercantile trading with England and the West Indies and owned much of the land in Salem, which is what helped him to gain positions of power and authority in town. Judge Haythorne is responsible for handing down the most executions. Haythorne had a well-documented callousness toward the accused witches, and it is due to his treatment of the innocent that this home is the central focus for the interest in Salem's haunted history. He had the nickname of the Hanging Judge, and many accused him of using his seat to commit murder, but legally. Tours are available of the witch house, and there are several artifacts from this time period, including documents from the actual Salem witch trials displayed in the kitchen area. There is also an odd practice during this era of placing a shoe inside of a home's wall in order to ward off witches and warlocks. And so the witch house keeps an old black shoe from a previous owner to reminisce on this old practice. There's also, did you include? Okay, so yes, and I'll go into that in a minute. There is also a witchcraft doll on display, which is called a poppet, and witches would allegedly place hexes on these dolls in order to curse their victims. This doll was found in a different but nearby home and is said to be the one where Bridget Bishop lived, who was the first woman executed by hanging during the witch trials. The witch house was very nearly demolished in 1944 to widen the street, but locals formed the historic Salem Incorporated and banded together and put a stop to this by raising $42,000 that it would take to move this house back 35 feet to where it currently sits. For context, that would be approximately $763,156.70 in today's money. That's crazy.
That's for just to move a house 35 feet.
2 architects restored it to its original 17th century style, and the witch house was handed over to the city of Salem, and it was made into the museum that it is today. One of the most reported encounters with the paranormal is disembodied voices. Others have claimed to have been touched by unseen forces, and experiences of cold spots throughout the house are not uncommon. There have been some reports of the disembodied voice of a little girl, and is thought that she is the youngest accused of witchcraft at just 4 years old, who was the daughter of Sarah Good. Other claims included electronic disruption. Of course, Ghost Adventures went there back in 2011. I did watch that episode. Yeah. I think when I was doing my research for the first time that we did the Salem episode, and they made note of the shoe. They made note of the poppet. I'm using this loosely, made contact with who they believe to be Bishop, the woman.
Bishop.
Yeah, there we go. The EVP that they gathered sounded, if it's true, sounded to have said Bishop.
Oh.
And they had called in like 2 other, a witch and a warlock dude that were local.
Yeah.
To do part of the investigation with them. That was obviously very scripted.
Yeah.
But it was one of their better episodes, I do believe.
Well, shit.
If there is such a thing
when
it comes to Ghost Adventures.
Is this the last one?
Yes, that's what I was looking at.
The Old Burying Point Cemetery, also referred to as the Charter Street Cemetery, is the oldest maintained European established cemetery in Salem and is among one of the oldest European established cemeteries in the United States. I wanted to make that clear just because, like, I know that there were like Native American burial grounds long before. But the oldest European established burial ground is the King's Chapel Burying Ground in Boston, which was founded 7 years earlier in 1630, in case you ever needed that for trivia or something. Opened in 1637, it is the final resting place for several notable names in Salem. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places as part of Salem's Charter Street Historic District. The first recorded reference to the old burying point was in 1637 when a local man named John Horn was granted permission to erect a windmill in the burial place. The next mention appears in 1639 and pertained to the same windmill and the same place, saying, ordered, and it just said today the YT means white, ordered YT John Horn shall desist from his enclosure in ye bury all place, and it might be yet ye town shall pay for 1/4 of an acre when he hath bought ye same, except the town when they shall have changed the bury all. Now burial is spelled 2 different ways in this little thing. Shall allow him a portion of the same. Personally, I don't even know what the fuck any of that means, and I promise I wrote this when I was sober. Notable names in the cemetery include...
The F word. You did it.
I dropped it. It's fine. Richard Moore, a Mayflower passenger. Dorothy Cromwell. I think that's supposed to be Dorothy. Dorothy Cromwell, midwife, earliest surviving death date in the cemetery. Judge John Hathorne, we've discussed this piece of shit. Bartholomew Gedney sat on the court of Oyer and Terminer during the Salem witch trials. Chief Justice Benjamin Lind presided over the Boston Massacre trial. Primus Lind was a man who was enslaved by the previous mentioned Benjamin Lind. Elias Haskett Derby was an early American millionaire. Samuel McIntyre was a famous architect and namesake of the McIntyre district. Nathaniel Mather was the son of Reverend Increase Mather and brother of Reverend Cotton Mather. And Mary Corey was the second wife of Giles Corey. She died 8 years before the trials. His third wife, Martha, was hanged for witchcraft 3 days after he was pressed to death in a Salem field. But the spirits, we have arrived at our second and final lady in white of the episode. And I put insert cheers here. While many folks are said to linger around the cemetery, not all of the spirits are folks who are said to be buried there, and some are said to have a dark aura around them. One of those is the lady in white. Her identity is unknown, but many people believe that she is one of the witches condemned to death during the trials. She appears momentarily dressed in all white, and once she is spotted, she is said to transform into bright orbs and before disappearing entirely. It almost sounds like when Dracula turns into a bat.
Right.
Some people have attempted to obtain photos of her, but this doesn't really happen due to her tendency to bolt immediately. Judge Hathorne is also known to be hanging about the cemetery, particularly at night when visitors have reported seeing his apparition. And as we know, Judge Hathorne is the one to have passed down the order of execution for Sarah Good. And it is worth noting that she allegedly cursed Reverend Nicholas Noyes, who presided over her execution, by saying, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. And if you take my life away, God will give you blood to drink." 25 years later, he died of a hemorrhage that caused his mouth and lungs to fill with blood. Ooh! Another spirit that has been seen around the old burying point is that of Giles Corey, and is also thought to be a harbinger of disaster for Salem, as he only shows up when they are about to undergo like a great...
that's scary.
Yeah. Another spirit spotted is that of the lady in the blue dress, who is seen wearing a powder blue dress and carrying a picnic basket. As with the lady in white, her identity is unknown, but she nearly always appears at the back corner of the cemetery with a little boy who is thought to be her son. The little boy is always wearing shorts, a black shirt, and a hat. It is thought that they are mother and son who perished in a fire. The place that they appear seems to be a paranormal magnet, and often is the area with the most electronic equipment malfunctions occur, particularly with cameras. Some of these paranormal occurrences are thought to be tied to a fire that broke out at the Charter Street Inn that took several lives. The inn once stood in the spot where the lady in blue and the boy are spotted. Allegedly, the woman and her son escaped while the husband attempted to handle the blaze without success, and when they went to help him, he had already died. Of course, this has been a whole episode on some of the worst moments for humanity, and it is important to remember these lessons and learn from these lessons, but not to hold on to these dark chapters in our hearts, but understand that they never really leave us. And let this remind us to take caution in the darkness surrounding us and to be a light, even if it is just a wee little one.
A wee little one.
So, wow, Salem haunted as hell.
Yeah. We could do several episodes on Salem alone.
Yeah. I tried to find, so I've talked about that book, Here Lies a Vengeful Bitch. The author lives and works in Salem.
Maddie is really enjoying that, by the way.
It's so
if she's
good.
Not done.
I've got the audio. I've got the audiobook finally. I got an audiobooks.com account and got 3 credits for signing up. So I used one of my credits to get that book on audiobook too, because I wanted to experience it again. But so the author lives and works in Salem, and she works at this place called Nocturne. And like, she's posted this on, like, it's on TikTok. She works here. I'm not like outing her or whatever.
Right.
And so she said that like the building where Nocturne is a little bit haunted. She was like, but at this time they had a top hat, right? She was like, I think not really the store is haunted, but some of the pieces that we get sometimes are haunted. She was like, that top hat caused some mischief. Like, I wanted to go back and find, it was like 2 years ago, I think, or like last year she was talking about it. So it would take me forever to find those TikToks, and I couldn't find like any other stories about Nocturne ghost stories online because I'd only ever heard her tales. But I would like to find those and insert that into a part 2 for this. So, but yeah, I want to save up and I want to go on I want to do a Salem trip.
I feel like that needs to be a podcast trip.
And I want it to be like, I think I want like spring.
Yeah, I don't want to go. I would
love to go in the fall,
but it's
like
so damn busy and
like,
touristy.
Even I've listened to now a series of audiobooks. It's a cozy mystery, but it's like Witch City Mysteries, and it's the main character lives in Salem. She's back there after her husband died. All this. She's always stumbling on a body. But it helps me learn how to pronounce some of this shit. And B, like, even in the book, like, you know that the author knows the struggle. Because they're like, we can't get anywhere because of the traffic in October. And I'm like, this feels like a complaint.
I feel like you need to get some kind of book series to listen to help us both out with some of these French places, names, words.
Be signing up for like Rosetta Stone or something.
Oh, well, that's another week. Make sure that you are checking out our nonprofits for the month, the Chronic Liver Disease Foundation and the Global Liver Institute.
And all of their information will be linked in the description, and I'm sure we'll have like scheduled social media posts and all that about it too. So
they ain't gotta know they're scheduled. We doing it on day of.
Oh yeah, I do that on the fly at the same time every week. And I've never accidentally scheduled it for the wrong day.
Oh well. Well, make sure that you're following us on all the socials such as Facebook,
Instagram,
TikTok,
YouTube.
Is that it?
I guess so. We've got like other accounts, but we don't really post to them.
Those are the ones that we do have, that we know we have, and one of them at least is not ever used, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Email us at wandersofweird@gmail.com. All right.
Bye.
Bye.